whole letter is about being free in Christ. That Christ, as he died on the cross, paying the price for my sin and rose again 3 days later, proclaiming victory over that death, he set me free from sin enslavement. And so today, because of my faith in him and his work on the cross and that grace given to me, I can walk in freedom because of Jesus. That's the central idea of this letter. And that freedom conversation can't happen without the context of grace. And it's all over the book of Galatians. We looked at it last week. We saw last week in verse 4, applied again in verse 6. And so it's all over the context. And so this week as we look at this, grace is still the context. And so the second and last of 2 points that I will give you this morning is the empowering grace of Christ carries us beyond life's obstacles. The empowering grace of Christ carries us beyond life's obstacles. In other words, the empowering grace of Christ, this is what we talked about last Sunday. It's not about performing for Christ, but rather it's being known in Christ. Not about performing something for him, but rather it's being known in him. And I shared with you this idea last week of the great exchange, right? You look, and for those of you who are Excel sheet people, maybe I'll Excel spreadsheet people. Obviously I'm not. I'll give you this word picture. If you looked and you had this row and you had all of these things listed of the effort to hide my sin of pride, and you had an hour over here in this cell, and on the next row you had all of the effort towards hiding my sin of whatever ends up on my internet search history, and you had the effort and hours, a number marking that over here in this cell. And next you had the hours trying to overcome the inappropriate way that I speak to my husband, and you had an amount over here in that cell. And then you did one of those fancy things that you Excel people do, where you take all of the things in that column and you get a sum at the end, right down there. And you took all of that effort, that sum, whatever that number is, and you said, I'm going to leverage all of that effort. Stop trying to perform for Christ, but I'm going to leverage all of that effort to being known by Christ, knowing him, an intimacy and a real relationship with him. And that's where freedom is found. That's where freedom, that's the freedom of the gospel. That's where life change happens.